Sorry, your question again?
Okay. If you were to miss Aisha prayer, okay, and then you wake up above Fajr, is it possible to make a Aisha or
If you missed Isha prayer and you wait
yeah?
before the time for Fajr has come in, so technically the time for Isha all the way until the beginning time for Fajr.
Oh,
So you would still be able to pray. Now, you should never purposely dislike to delay it past midnight, but you're still within the Isha time. So if you woke up at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m., you can still pray the Isha prayer.
okay. But I have a second question.
Yeah.
What if you the Aisha after Fajr or no?
Make up Isha after Fajr. Okay. Technically, after, yes, you can still make up Isha prayer. You just don't do it during sunrise. Any prayer during sunrise in particular, but making up a missed prayer, normally you don't do any sunnah after Fajr. A qada prayer is okay after Fajr. Okay.
How do you make up missing prayers? Can you give us like for Fajr, how do you make it up? Like
Two fard, exactly the same way you would normally make it up. Yeah.
Okay, so just
You
the
can-
fard.
For Fajr, you can add sunnah if you want to,
Okay.
because it's a very emphasized sunnah. But if you don't, just two is sufficient. Yes.
What if you don't remember how many you missed?
If you don't remember how many you missed, you go with your certainty. So you try to figure out, try to estimate and say, you know what, it's probably 3 or 4. I know 3 for sure. Maybe I can add a 4th one as optional, but try to estimate how many you missed.
But I heard there was a hadith that it's sunnah to do witr before Fajr. I don't know if that's sure if that's true. So that's what I've been doing, but I don't know if that's like true to do witr before Fajr.
So witr is recommended to do it before Fajr time if you can wake up.
Yeah.
And if you can't wake up, then you should do it before you sleep.
Right.
Okay.
If you're, I'm sorry, if you're playing, overseas
Mm.
against the clock and you keep getting into different time zones, like how do you deal with that?
So we're going to cover that in
Oh,
traveling
all right.
very short soon, inshallah.
Did you
Yes.
already cover the times when you're not supposed to do sajda?
No, we didn't.
Is that coming?
It's coming, inshallah. It might come, inshallah. If not, then ask me, inshallah. All right. Friday prayer. So Jummah prayer, there's a purpose to Jummah prayer. The purpose is for the community to gather together at least once a week. So, praying inside of a masjid is something that's recommended so that people get to see each other, the Muslim Ummah becomes stronger. But the Friday prayer is heavily emphasized more than the normal, everyday prayer, because at least once a week, Muslims should gather together, meet each other, and they also get the benefit of getting some reminder, because everybody needs a reminder once in a while. So who needs to attend the Friday prayer? It's mandatory. It's required for all adult males to attend the Friday prayer. And even for women, it's recommended for them to still come to the prayer because they need to get some knowledge and they need a reminder and all of that. But they don't fall in the same category because they may be tending to family needs and all that. So Allah made it a little bit easier for them. But for adult males, it's required for them that they need to go for the Friday prayer every single week. If you can't make it for the Friday prayer, or if you don't because you're a kid or because you're a woman or something like that, you need to pray Zuhr, because the Friday prayer was a substitute for the Zuhr prayer. Right? Now, what are the excuses for not attending Friday prayer if you're an adult male? You have 3 conditions, 3 cases. Number 1, if you're traveling, it's not a requirement. Now, if you're traveling, if you can find a masjid, still a good idea to go to the masjid and visit a new place and attend the Friday prayer, but it's not a technical requirement if you're traveling. Number 2, if you're sick, and if you're genuinely sick and you're ill and it's difficult for you to come to the masjid, or you're contagious or something, you are excused. And number 3 is if there would be a severe difficulty, like if there's a snowstorm and it's really hard and kind of dangerous to make it out to the masjid or something like that, that would be in the category of difficulty. What happens though is sometimes people will either place themselves in the category of severe difficulty when it's really not that difficult, or they'll place themselves in the category of I can do this, but it's really difficult and they're putting themselves at risk. It's very important to categorize yourself properly. So let's give an example for college students, right? College students has a class on campus and it happens to be at Jummah time. Do they need to go for Friday prayer or not?
They should, yes,
Yes, they should. Why?
because there's not really a difficulty. But,
Yeah.
and they are able to go there, like, but technically,
Yeah, so they could record their class, have somebody else take notes. They're not going to fail. They're not going to drop out. They're not going to get kicked out of school. So the ramifications are really not that great. So they need to go for Jummah prayer. Now, let's say they're about to take an exam for their graduation, and it's only exactly on this Friday, and there's no makeups, there's no sick, there's nothing. They're going to have to wait an entire year to take this exam. Let's say it's the bar exam and someone has become a lawyer and this is the only time frame that they have. And they have to wait another year before they can take this exam. Do they have a valid excuse or they don't? They have a valid excuse. So you can see an example of what's a valid excuse and what's not a valid excuse, right? So it's important that you categorize yourself properly. So the timing of Jummah prayer. The timing of Jummah prayer is the same as the timing of Zuhr prayer. So when Zuhr time comes in, which is right after the sun crosses the meridian, we talked about Zuhr prayer timing, and it ends at the end of Zuhr prayer, which was what? Who remembers?
Before Asr.
Which is what? Correct, before Asr, which is what?
Before the sun goes lower, or one shadow.
Ah, there we go. One shadow. What does one shadow mean?
Like one shadow, like the side of yourself on ground.
Yeah,
shadow.
so when yourself becomes one shadow length, that's when the time for Asr prayer starts and the time for Zohar prayer is done. So that is the time for Jummah prayer. Now what happens is there's a few scholars who have a minority opinion that you can actually pray Jummah prayer a little bit earlier than Zohar time. And some scholars who say you could pray a little bit later than Zohar time. Now, these are not majority opinions that many people have accepted, but they're there. And what happens is Muslims who are living in a country where they say, look, our work is not allowing us to go out for lunchtime during this time. And there, we don't have care or we don't have any organization that can fight for our rights and ensure that we're able to take time off of work or something like that. In those countries, like in France and places like that, where there's a lot of racism against Muslims, they have allowed that fatwa, and they say, we take this fatwa saying that since some of the scholars said it's allowed before, or some of the scholars said it's allowed after, if there's a need, we can take this other opinion that, genuine scholars have said it's okay, based on some hadiths. We don't think they're the strongest, but we're allowed to take them in that situation. So this should never be a default, but it's allowed when there's a need for that. In America, I don't think there's a need, especially not in California, because there's a legal right for you to take time off of work for religious reasons, and you can make up that work time. So you have a right to attend Jummah prayer. Okay, so that's the timing. The location of Jummah prayer doesn't have to be inside of a masjid. It can be anywhere. So if you have college students on campus, and they have a class at that time, what they can do is wait until the break time of the class. In the middle of the class, they can go right outside their class. Someone can go give a khutbah, 2-minute khutbah, 3-minute khutbah, pray the Jummah prayer, and it's going to be considered valid. So the location can be anywhere. It could be in a park. It could be, in a masjid. It could be outside, wherever it may be. In terms of the minimum number of people that you need to have a valid Jummah prayer, there need to be 3 adult men plus an imam. So there's an imam and there's a minimum of 3 adult men who are required to attend the prayer. So this is the minimum is about 4. There's one scholar, he said the minimum was 3. Other scholars said like 40, 12 or much higher numbers. So this is a good number, 4 total, including the imam, of people who need to pray. So that's usually you can find that many people, in a work environment or in a college environment. And if you can't, then Jummah is not mandated for you, and you could pray Zohar prayer instead. So how do you perform the Jummah prayer? Well, there's 2 adhans for Jummah. Normally for every prayer, there's 1 adhan, but for Jummah, there's 2. So it's going to be 1 adhan for everyone to start getting ready. And then what happens is, right when people come to the masjid, before the khutbah, before the sermon is going to happen, there's a second adhan that's going to be called. And this is the adhan right before the imam starts giving the khutbah. Then what's going to happen is the imam will start by giving a sermon. He's going to give a reminder to people, say Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah, and then conclude it and sit down. He's going to sit down kind of like the time in between two sajdas or two prostrations. He's going to stand back up, give a second sermon, second khutbah, and then he's going to call the iqamah. So the iqamah will be called and the prayer will start, and there's going to be 2 rakahs, 2 units of prayer, which is going to be out loud. Anyone who joins the prayer, the Jummah prayer, even if they join at the end, they just barely make it, they're still going to get up, they're going to make their 2 rakahs, but it's not going to turn into Zuhr prayer. It still counts for Jummah prayer as long as you caught it by the end of the prayer. If you miss Jummah prayer, you cannot pray Jummah by yourself, so you're going to pray Zuhr prayer instead. Right? Some of the etiquettes of Jummah. You should avoid bad smells. The Prophet ﷺ told us not to eat onions or garlic before coming to the masjid for Jummah because so many people are going to be around you. And today that would include smoking or anything else that just smells really bad. You're supposed to brush your teeth before you go for Jummah. You're supposed to put on some perfume and smell nice. You're supposed to take a bath or a shower on Friday in the morning or right before you go for Jummah prayer. At minimum, the night before, which is starting from Maghrib time, because the day technically starts after sunset, this in the Islamic calendar. You're not supposed to be talking during Jummah at all. You're not supposed to say one word. So if your friend next to you is talking, you cannot tell him, hey, be quiet. You're not allowed to talk in Jummah. That counts as talking. So you can gesture and you can say like, you can tap him or something like that, but you cannot talk at all. And you cannot conduct any business during Jummah. Not in the masjid, ever. There's no business allowed inside the masjid, but during Jummah, you cannot be doing business outside. So if you're buying and selling something and the Jummah prayer is going on, and that's the Jummah prayer you're supposed to be attending, you're not allowed to do any of that business. And that's pretty much it. Questions on Jummah? Yes.
Wait, so what if like it's better for some people to do it after like the her time, like for example after, but like the only thing that's stopping them from doing it during the her time is like what if like not enough people come to pray Jummah, like not 4 people.
Okay. So if they can't get enough people to get the minimum requirement during the normal Zohar time, and they're like, the only way we can do it is if we go with this other opinion. And if everyone was going to miss Jummah because of that, then go ahead and do that. Yes. And the question.
Yeah, okay, so what if there's a non, like, what if, tell someone else that's like not like a non-Muslim to like stand outside and like sell goods. Like, is it simple?
Okay. If a Muslim orders a non-Muslim to sell outside the masjid during Jummah time on their behalf.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yes, the point is anything that's distracting people from going for Jummah is prohibited, right? So if it's distracting people away from Jummah and they're supposed to be inside, but they're buying stuff outside, then yes, they're responsible as well. So they should not do that. Okay.
So if we don't have minimum people to do Jummah prayer, let's say there are only 2 people, can they do like a Jummah for Zuhr prayer?
Yeah, they could do Jama'ah for Zuhr prayer if there's not meeting the minimum number. Yeah.
I've seen this on the Sajid here in County, where you do the second adhan after the khutbah, it's pretty much done. So it's not like in the beginning. So there is the first one, then the imam will give the khutbah, you sit down, stand up, and then there's
Oh.
second adhan, and then
So what you're referring to is what happens is there are some people who believe that the khutbah needs to be in Arabic, 100%. So what they do is they'll give, yes, this is why.
Oh, okay.
So what they'll do is they'll do the first azan, then they're going to give a lecture in English. And they don't call it a khutbah, they call it a lecture. And then they're going to give the second azan, and then they're going to give a khutbah only in Arabic. and then they're going to do the prayer because they believe the khutbah can only be in Arabic. You cannot have any words of English or any other language in there. So they give an additional random lecture before. That's what's happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, which must make
Oh, Tustin Masjid is one of those.
Masjid, yeah,
Tustin
yeah,
Masjid is
yeah.
one of those. They've known for 20 years. They always do.
Arabic?
No, so they believe that the khutbah has to be in Arabic 100%. So what they do, most of the people who give khutbah there, so what they do is they do a lecture before the khutbah, and then they do the khutbah only in Arabic.
Most of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, they follow.
The whole country, the whole India, Pakistan,
They follow,
Bangladesh.
like, is this the practice?
This is not the Hanafi school, but this is what they follow.
Wait, is there any madhab or something?
So there are some madhabs that say this, yes.
Like which one?
The other three, the Hanafi were actually the most lenient on this, which is surprising, yes.
So
Yeah.
about, heard that if you miss 3 Jummahs consecutively, you leave the whole of Islam. Is that accurate?
So the idea of missing 3 Jummahs in a row, so serious as if you've gone outside of Islam. It doesn't mean that you're actually kafir or disbeliever, but if you shouldn't be missing even 1 Jummah. But if you miss 3 in a row, that's a very, very serious thing. So yeah, unless you have a legitimate excuse like travel or something like that. So it means people should go out of their way to make sure they get time off of work and they make it to a masjid.
Well, like you said, when you're traveling, you can try to find a masjid and not just use the caveat that I'm traveling.
As long as you're in a place that has Muslims, yeah. No. Any other questions? Okay, we'll leave it at that. And next week, then we'll cover prayer when you're injured and prayer when you're traveling, inshallah. Okay, see you next week. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.